What's up, guys, and welcome to another video. So earlier in the week I talked to you guys about my first little newbie experiences into the world of decorating. About 2 weeks ago I talked to you about the creation of this new guild in order to play mini games and cool game types based around the guild hall arenas and all the fantastic new things we can do there. And today, after I would say at least 12 hours worth of concerted effort from multiple people, we have crafted our first special arena. I want to talk to you guys about what exactly you can do with the arena at the moment and what is going to be running for our tournament during the streams next week. Now, the specific day isn't nailed down. You'll find that in the description, though, for when it is nailed down. And I want to show you guys exactly how this is going. So, in the video earlier in the week, I talked about something that is still true, that arena decorations are bugged. They do not work. They've been broken through the entire holiday season. I do not believe it's intentional. I do not believe it will remain this way for a very, very long time. But workaround that we have employed involves using regular decorations to make the arena a fun and interesting place anyway. And this is what we've now come up with. We're calling it the Ice Arena. You know, the snowy arena for the winter season. It's made of a lot of snow and a lot of ice. And there's a lot of cool features associated with it that I think we've pretty much pushed this limit to this arena to its absolute limit in terms of interesting things you can do as a new guild. Now, bear in mind, when I say new guild, I don't necessarily mean small guild, because you're probably looking at about 1,300 to 500 gold in this one image right here before we even get in there. You're looking at a lot of gold to make some of these things, but it's kind of a fun idea and something I do want to talk about. So, first of all, we have this spiral. This spiral I mentioned on a previous video. It's sort of an aid for spectators. This is a multi-story arena. And so actually being able to climb up a little bit higher and instead of like being totally level here, can allow you to get more of a bird's eye view and see, say, through the cracks in the middle of the arena here. As there are deliberate holes on the top of the second floor, as best we can do. Now, just so that you guys know, these are the things that we're competing with. We're competing with gold in order to actually afford the decorations. We're competing with scribes. Scribes themselves, level 400 scribes required to make these big ice blocks, which are fantastic for decorating, are very, very difficult to find because there are 400 scribes you need, and there aren't too many 400 scribes around. Plus, each ice block costs in the hundreds of gold each. Maybe not all the way up to 300 gold, but a hell of a lot of gold each. And this design for this arena actually employs 8 of them. We're also competing against the decoration limit. We're competing against the global decoration cap, which my guild has now hit, and I'll do a different video on that. But we're competing against the global cap and also the local cap. If I were to go and decide to decorate right here, right now, you'll see I basically can't place anything anywhere. And that's because we have squeezed as much of the playable space as we can out of this arena. And there are only weird, like, arbitrary places where it really doesn't serve the gameplay at all that we could add more snow. So that is the main thing that we've been fighting against. And then one final mechanic that we've been playing against is there's really very, very few tools to make stuff. So what you're looking at right now is the bottom floor of the arena. It's pretty simple how we've done this. I didn't really want too much weird terrain or geometry. You can create trenches out of snow that allow people to come up and down and, you know, duck for cover and so on against projectile-based stuff. We decided not to have any of that on the lower floor. It's nice, it's flat. For most purposes, the arena is just as playable as it ever usually would be if you're considering the bottom floor. Now, when you're in the very middle, you're a bit more limited with your camera, yes, at certain angles. At other angles, your camera's sort of still okay because you can come up inside, which is hollow. But yeah, you've basically got your regular arena. People with projectiles with high arcs, such as elementalists on subs, aren't likely to be obstructed by anything because we deliberately had the second floor a bit higher up. So that's the bottom floor. We also have an extension to the out of the bottom floor in 2 halves. So this is what we're calling the outer ring. This actually makes the arena bigger. This is all still legal fighting space. People can come here to actually use these pillars as a part of the combat. Now, the Gilded Hollow, by comparison, doesn't have this because it would cost you decorations to be able to place this kind of stuff down. We just get it built in here, and we get to extend the arena to about the size that the Gilded Hollow is, if you consider this snow. But the snow doesn't exist everywhere. Sometimes the outer ring disappears to make way for upper floor stuff, because, again, the local decoration cap means we can't have it surround the entire thing. But that adds kind of, funnily enough, the limitations, and this is what I'm going to be explaining to you guys in this video, the limitations of the decoration system right now have actually created interesting gameplay for us. So, for example, if when we talk about the second floor, we're up here, there is no outer ring here. So if you get knocked off, it's easier to die because the edge of the arena is closer to you. So there's like a payoff to it, or a push-pull, like a benefit to it. So then we've got the outer ring resumes here. It progresses all the way around until eventually on the opposite side of the previous floor, we have another section up high. So this is the lower floor. This is what this looks like. Let's talk about the second floor. The second floor is designed to be played on. It's all up there. Now, just a minute ago, I mentioned that the last thing we were competing against were, like, the lack of tools. Now, decorating, I never mentioned this in my previous video, because I didn't know about it in my previous video. I've forgotten it was a thing. But if you choose to decorate and say you want this basic flagpole, actually, by holding left click, you can rotate stuff. This is basically the only tool you get. In other games, you would expect to be able to, say, hold shift right now, and then it would rotate in the other direction, and that would be fantastic for Guild Wars 2. It would blow open what people can do, but you can't. You can only ever place, basically, decorations in one orientation right now. So that's a limitation. For example, snow. Snow is okay. We tried to build a floor here. Now, on top of this floor, you'll notice it's all bumpy all over the place. The underside of snow is actually flat, because it's meant to be placed on the ground. Now, if there was a Z-axis rotation, we could flip all of these and we could have a flat surface, we could have a flat floor. That would change a lot of stuff. That would make the game much, much, much better. But Arenanet haven't allowed us to do that. I'm not sure why, but maybe it is a design thing. Maybe they decided they didn't want people doing really weird stuff. But even just thinking about putting stuff at diagonal angles so you can make proper slopes and so on, even with things as basic as snow, is a great idea. But unfortunately, we cannot do. So that's one limitation. The other is the need for scaffolding. Now, this stuff's floating. So what we actually had to do was drag snow out from the edges of the arena where we could place it over here, and then we had to build piles of snow up to a point, and then we had to place an ice block on top of it. Then once we had that, we had to remove the snow from underneath, drag it along, and do it again. Now, in some ways, I actually really like the scaffolding system. I like that there are so many different decorations you can use for support, like a flagpole, to pluck stuff. So, for example, if I wanted to just remove this one bit of snow from this second floor, I could drop a flagpole on top of it, as long as the local decoration cap hadn't been hit, and then ground target the removal tool quite high up to pluck it out. And that kind of scaffolding idea is fun, but it can be really frustrating. See, when we were placing the second block, you had to make sure it was the perfect height on top of bumpy snow, and it was the perfect orientation. Not to mention that these ice blocks themselves, as decorations, aren't smoothly cut. They're all, like, weirdly diagonally cut. So in some ways, it's been frustrating with this. In some ways, it's been really interesting and added some flavor to the decorating experience. But I do think we do need a bit more leeway with where we can place stuff, and I'll explain that at the end of the video. Regardless, fighting all these limits, all the gold spent, the need to access scribes to make the stuff, decorators who can spend hours and hours faffing about with these tiny little things, drop in, replacing, drop in, replacing, drop in, replacing. Finally, we have something pretty functional. So, not only do we have to create a second floor, but we need a way to get up there too. So, the snow is the best way for us to do this as well. Each individual block of snow here had to be painstakingly placed so that it was easy to climb up this staircase, right, in combat with people without swiftness. These are all things we had to consider. But also that it didn't use too much snow. Now, we could have made a much, less sheer bridge. But if you do that, it costs a lot more snow. And then if you've cost a lot more snow here, you can't have, like, the outer ring necessarily so much on there. Or especially, it really impacts what you can put on the second floor itself. So you can see here, it's like a bit of a trickier jump. So once you've done that there, you have to make sure it's symmetrical on the other side of the arena too, and that this one isn't too sheer. So you'll actually notice that immediately there were some weird things with the arena, and this is kind of the really fun stuff to figure out, like, problems that we had to solve. Here on this stairway up onto the second floor of the arena, you'll see that our last step is sunk into it. Now, this is kind of cool because it sort of makes it, in my mind, make it a part of the second floor rather than a part of the bridge. And that's cool. And everything about this platform is symmetrical, right? It's a mirror image design. But for some reason, and the outer ring does not... Don't worry about that smashing. We'll talk about that in a second. The outer ring doesn't impact this at all. For some reason, we couldn't do that on this bridge. So on this bridge, we had to, like, build really far out and find the perfect position. If this was a millimeter closer to the right of the structure, it would break. It wouldn't work. So we can actually sink it in here because of the local limit. So we had to make sure it was just far enough away and also high enough so that you can make the jump and you can make it comfortably without swiftness in combat and so on. And then all these had to be changed to suit, and we had to make sure that we had the same amount for the bridge. It's really, really interesting. But so let's come up. Let's see what the design of this place is like. So what we've basically gone with here is we could have had 4 blocks in the middle, all next to each other, and then another ring around the outside of them of blocks, right? That actually would have been a 16-block design. And it would have given us about the same amount of space as we currently have. After those 16 blocks, those 16 decorations in place, each of them contributing to the local cap, we then could have, you know, built a ring of snow as best we could around it, and that would have made up our second floor. But the problem is, these blocks are so expensive. I made a joke on Twitter the other day. In theory, you could make a 2,000 block ice palace, and it would cost millions and millions and millions of gold somewhere in your guild hall, and it would just be this most ridiculous thing. This is a lot of money, so we had to be very sparing. Instead of a 16 block design, we went with an 8 block design. 4 inner blocks, 4 outer blocks, and we kind of went with this cross in the middle. And then what we did with the cross was we plugged in the holes using snow. Finally, we had a 9th block, which we went to the effort of making, cannibalizing a lot of the stuff in the guild, and we were wondering what should we do with the 9th block. And so what we chose to do was, what I chose to do was drop it on the top in the middle here, thus blocking off the very central hole in the middle entirely. But we kind of like the idea of there being holes because, number one, if you choose not to use any snow here, and make a hole, then this snow can be used elsewhere. Somebody's turning these on or off, which is a bit of a shame. You could use this block of snow, say, on the outer rim here and make this look more filled in. So that was a theoretical possibility, and we decided to hit the middle ground. So we have 2 filled in, but 2 deliberate holes as well. And you'll notice that the 2 holes that we have that allow you to fall to the bottom floor, say if somebody CCs you off, these are deliberately placed in the same places that the bridges exist, so that snow can be used so that the bridge can work. So you see there's a very delicate balance here, that because we've got such a local limit, it's restricted us and caused us to have this hole design. Now, in theory, I don't know whether this is true, but there are, of course, arena-based decorations too. If they don't have the same local cap, eventually when our guild is a slightly higher level, what we can do is put kill floors down here, or damaging turrets, or fear turrets, or just things that cause negative, you know, have an impact against you if you fall down one of these small holes from the top. So there's a little bit of risk up there, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of the design of the central part. And once we had constructed this entire thing, once we've got as much snow as possible around the outside to give people as much space as possible, though there are visual gaps, that none of these are actually gaps. It's a little bit bumpy because, hey, we got snow and we can't reverse it, but, you know, that just makes it slightly more interesting terrain, I suppose. Once we had finished this, we realized there were still 2 corners of the arena that were okay to build on, and there were these pillars that were straying out from them. So, with a little bit of gliding, you can come over and actually get safe perches once again to maybe shoot people out if this is some kind of deathmatch game type. And, you know, you can be able to snipe people from here, or maybe you can do it on the exact opposite end of the arena, which is actually the preferred one for me, which is a bigger platform. Why is that a bigger platform? Well, because the local limit allowed for more creativity and more space. It's not too much of a difference, but this one actually is kind of nice. It was kind of cool once we got the guildies in, after this has been built. People immediately started testing stuff out, and, you know, we had like a daredevil who used Vault to get directly from here over there. It was really cool to see how people were taken to the train. People are practicing because the tournament, they can win a precursor in this arena later on next week. You guys can too if you're watching this video, as long as you sign up, you show up to the stream. And, you know, people are practicing seeing exactly where they can leap to, what they can do. We're thinking that these can be starting platforms for where people begin, you know, the arena. You could have maybe one team on this platform, one team over on that platform. And that's kind of the design. This is the most playable space you can squeeze out. You cannot make, currently, a full second floor unless maybe fountains are possible as a low-level guild. So that's what we'll look at in the future. Once the actual arena decorations are re-implemented, maybe you can do something else. But this has really opened my eyes to some very interesting things. So, for example, think of this. Think if we had unlimited resources. Imagine that there's no snow. Imagine this block in the middle isn't here. What you could actually do is a checkerboard pattern. You actually would have enough space. Snow counts as much for the local limit as a giant block of ice does. So all these little snow packets could be giant blocks of ice if you had an ungodly amount of money. And you could actually make a whole checkerboard across the entire arena. And it would be a little bit like an ice rink. Actually, you could try and fill it in entirely. I'm not sure whether that would be possible. But by doing this, you could have a game type where people have to flip the ice. So the one sad thing about these ice blocks is that they kind of have an animation to them. They kind of have a unique gimmick to them. So we'll look at the one in the middle. If you highlight them, you'll notice that they're being highlighted. If you highlight them and press F, all right, they can shatter. And they'll carve out these little ice reindeer. This is actually what the decoration's supposed to be. Now, the hitbox does not change. Whether they're on or off, the hitbox does not change. Like right now, I'm running into the corner of it. And that's the same for if I remove one of these, say. I'm still walking around. Mechanically, the combat is exactly the same here. But we can turn all of these off if we like. And in combat, there's no way to stop permissions or any of this. So it's not ideal in various respects. But you can make all of the reindeer come out. They're actually all done in a reasonable platform. They point off in the different cardinal directions and so forth. So it does work. And now we've got a very different experience running around up here. We're not entirely sure where the holes are. See? So we just fell down. So you can have a kind of a cool game type where people are running around on and they're not quite sure what's going on. Again, imagine the idea that there are kill floors under all of this. You can have a game type where people aren't allowed to turn on the ice, or one team can turn on the ice, one team can't, and the only way anyone can die, everyone's on the invulnerable team, the only way anyone can die is to fall in the holes. And people are running around trying to CC them off, and they're not quite sure where the safe areas are or where they're not. And it's your team's job to keep all of the reindeers off to, obscure the vision of the enemy team. Or you could start with a giant ice rink across the entire arena, and have every other one flipped on. It's a regular PvP game type. So we could turn on the middle one as well if I get this just right. There you go. It's a regular PvP game type, but the winning team, so you can fight each other while you're up here, but the winning team is the team that flips the entire arena to either ice blocks or reindeer. So you're killing each other, you're trying to CC each other, and the first team to flip them all wins. It's kind of an interesting idea. I don't know how fun it would end up being, but it's really interesting to see now that I've spent so many hours designing this, so many hours doing it. Now, I've had the help of, I would say, 5 other people throughout the entire course of this thing's construction, and it's really been curious. I cannot express to you guys how frustrated I am by the local limit, by the lack of rotation, by how fiddly it can be. And I'll cap the video off with a very sad fact for you all. So right now you'll notice I am still legally in combat. I'm blue. This entire thing was designed so that the floor could be as high as possible. So it was basically level with the stands, like the Gilded Hollow, right? As high as possible, so that there would be as much headroom for players underneath for their cameras, okay? So that it would feel like you get the most playable space. Now, just by virtue of the classes that and our lack of intelligence, I suppose, about the game, and by the virtue of the classes we were playing as we designed this, we tested various things. What we tested was every time there was some snow that was a little bit high, like this seems quite high, and jumped, you would see, sometimes if the snow's even an inch higher than this and you jump, it would knock you out of combat. And that's terrible for the arena. Not only does it knock you out of combat, but it means you can still fight other people. They just can't fight you, which is just awful. Like, it's even worse. So, so we built it to be the exact height, and we tried stuff like lightning hammering, right? Like leaping with a lightning hammer, and we stayed in combat. We're like, okay, that's cool, leaps work. And then the second the community at large came in to test this the other day, we realized several Revenant skills break you out of combat because they move you that bit higher. I'm talking about Hammer 3, even one of the Malik's abilities can do it. Thankfully, vaulting as a daredevil doesn't work. So now we're faced with this horrible thing, right? Because the tools aren't in place. We're faced with this horrible situation where we have to remove and redo so many hours worth of effort, so many hours just to move this about an inch lower down. Now, I will just clarify, I was never a part of the group that decided that this had to be really pushing the limit. I would have had it a little bit lower. I kind of like the more claustrophobic lower camera, but whatever. But because we pushed it that high, we basically have to start from scratch. The outer ring only takes a couple of minutes to make. The bridges, as delicate as they have to be, don't take too long. Neither do those platforms. But this construction here, this was monumentally difficult to create. And we cannot just, like, highlight it all and, you know, shift it down a couple of inches, right? Even though it's this floating thing, we can't just grab it. Done. We have to do the entire thing again. Or ban Revenants, basically. Dragon Hunters using F2 as well. It knocks them out of combat while they're up there. So it breaks the second floor. Nonetheless, I'm still very proud of what we've made. I'm still very excited about it. I like to see the limits that we've managed to push the arena to. I'll talk to you guys more in the future about other configurations we have. We will be having a tournament on this. Perhaps a Rumble Pit style tournament. Perhaps multi-team. I'm not entirely sure. That will be going on with the streams. But let me know what you guys think. This is the Ice Arena from the Spud Club, with lots of cool stuff. I'd love to hear what you guys have managed to make, because the constructions that people have come out with have been fantastic. We also have 3 different jumping puzzles all at the same time going on this map, but little else. So yeah, we'll talk about the global limit some other day. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you've been enjoying the guild stuff, and I'll see you next time.